Have you ever wondered how the Israel-Palestine conflict, one of the world's longest-running disputes, actually began? Well, let's embark on a journey through time, back to the late 19th and early 20th centuries, to the cradle of this enduring conflict. The stage was set by the emergence of two powerful nationalist movements: Zionism, advocating for a Jewish homeland, and Arab nationalism, fighting for the independence and unity of Arab lands. These movements were akin to two tectonic plates, drifting on a sea of political and historical forces. Zionism's roots can be traced back to the Jewish communities in Europe, who sought refuge from escalating anti-Semitism by establishing a national homeland in Palestine. Meanwhile, Arab nationalism was gathering steam across the Arab world, fueled by a shared language, culture, and a desire for independence from colonial rule. These two movements, each with its own aspirations and dreams, were destined to collide, creating a fault line that would reverberate through the decades. And thus, the seeds of this long-standing conflict were sown. Fast forward to 1917, when a single document dramatically changed the course of history. The Balfour Declaration, a letter penned by Arthur Balfour, the British Foreign Secretary at the time, to Lord Rothschild, a prominent Zionist leader, promised the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. This promise was influenced by a variety of factors. Britain, embroiled in the First World War, was seeking support from all possible quarters, including the international Jewish community. The British government also believed that by supporting Zionist aspirations, they could secure their strategic interests in the Middle East. The Balfour Declaration was ambiguous in its wording, stating that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine. This ambiguity, however, didn't prevent the declaration from sparking outrage among the Arab population of Palestine. They saw it as a betrayal, as Britain had previously promised them independence in return for their support against the Ottoman Empire during the war. Palestine's Arab majority felt threatened by the influx of Jewish immigrants, fearing they would become a minority in their own land. The increased Jewish immigration led to tension and sporadic violence, fueling a cycle of resentment and conflict that escalated over the years. The British, caught between the promises made to both the Jews and the Arabs, struggled to maintain control. This culminated in the Arab Revolt of 1936–39, leading Britain to limit Jewish immigration and land purchase, further inflaming the situation. The Balfour Declaration, a document of barely 100 words, set in motion a chain of events that defined the future of the Middle East. It created a sense of optimism among Jews around the world, who saw it as a beacon of hope for a national homeland. However, for the Arab population, it represented an impending threat to their identity and their way of life, setting the stage for one of the most protracted conflicts of the 20th century. The Balfour Declaration, a promise made with good intentions, only served to stoke the flames of conflict. In the aftermath of World War II, the world witnessed the birth of a new nation. In the year 1947, the United Nations, the global organization tasked with maintaining international peace and security, made a monumental decision. The decision was to partition Palestine into two separate entities, a Jewish state and an Arab state. This decision, of course, was met with a whirlwind of reactions, both of jubilation and despair depending on who you asked. The Jewish people, having endured centuries of persecution, were finally promised a place they could call their own, a haven where they could live in peace, free from the fear of being othered. And thus, in May of 1948, the State of Israel was born, answering the prayers of countless generations of Jews around the world. But this birth was not without its pains. The partition plan was not welcomed by everyone. The Arab nations, who held a deep historical connection to the land, vehemently opposed this partition. They perceived it as an unjust division of what they considered their homeland. This disagreement soon escalated into a full-blown conflict known as the Arab-Israeli War, or the War of Independence, depending on which side of the narrative you're on. The war was a fierce and bloody struggle, and the stakes were high. It was a battle for survival, for identity, for a place to call home. Despite being outnumbered, the newly formed Israel Defense Forces managed to secure a victory. The war resulted in an expansion of the territory initially allocated to the Jewish state by the United Nations partition plan, solidifying Israel's presence in the region. But this victory came at a cost. The war created a vast number of refugees, both Jewish and Arab, and sowed the seeds of a conflict that continues to this day. And so, in 1948, Israel emerged as a sovereign state, but not without a cost. The following decades were marked by wars, uprisings, and a struggle for peace. Let's wind back the hands of time to 1967, a year that would forever change the landscape of the Middle East. It was during this year that the Six-Day War erupted, a conflict so swift yet so impactful, it redefined the borders of Israel and its neighboring countries. Israel, in a stunning display of military prowess, seized control of the Gaza Strip, the Sinai Peninsula, the West Bank, and the Golan Heights. This territorial expansion only served to intensify the existing conflict, further entrenching both sides in their respective positions. 6 years later, in 1973, the Yom Kippur War broke out. This was a surprise attack launched by Egypt and Syria against Israel on Yom Kippur, the holiest day in the Jewish calendar. Despite the initial shock, Israel managed to push back the offensive, but the war was a sobering reminder of the volatility of the region and the deep-seated animosity that existed. The final part of our timeline brings us to the two intifadas, uprisings by Palestinians against Israeli rule. The first intifada, which began in 1987, was characterized by civil disobedience, general strikes, boycotts, and clashes. The second intifada, starting in 2000, was much more violent, with suicide bombings and military operations becoming tragically commonplace. These uprisings were the manifestation of the frustrations and aspirations of the Palestinian people, yearning for self-determination and an end to occupation. Each of these events, the Six-Day War, the Yom Kippur War, and the two intifadas, left an indelible mark on the Israel-Palestine conflict. They not only changed the physical landscape but also the psychological one, further entrenching the divisions and animosities that had been brewing for decades. Each of these events further complicated the conflict, making a peaceful resolution seem increasingly elusive. So, where does that leave us today? Let's dive right in. The year is 2024, and the Israel-Palestine conflict, a saga that has spanned over a century, continues to shape the geopolitics of the Middle East. The issues at the heart of the conflict remain as complex and divisive as ever. Firstly, we have the issue of settlements. Israeli settlements in the West Bank have been a controversial topic since their inception. To some, these settlements represent the fulfillment of a biblical promise. To others, they stand as a stark symbol of occupation and displacement. Despite numerous United Nations resolutions declaring them illegal, these settlements continue to grow, further complicating the map of the region. Then, there's Jerusalem. This city, sacred to three major religions, is at the epicenter of the conflict. The status of Jerusalem remains a thorny issue, with both Israelis and Palestinians claiming it as their capital. The international community, however, has refrained from recognizing either claim fully, leaving the city's status in a state of perpetual limbo. Lastly, we have the question of Palestinian statehood. The dream of a sovereign Palestinian state, independent and free, is one that has eluded realization. Despite numerous attempts at peace negotiations and proposed two-state solutions, the road to statehood remains riddled with obstacles. These issues, coupled with the deep-seated historical animosities and polarized narratives, make the path to a peaceful resolution a daunting task. The conflict is not simply a political or territorial dispute, but a deeply rooted struggle for identity, security, and sovereignty. While the world watches and waits, the people of Israel and Palestine continue to live amidst this uncertainty, their lives dictated by the ebb and flow of a conflict that shows no signs of abating. In the grand scheme of things, the Israel-Palestine conflict serves as a stark reminder of the complexities of human relations and the enduring power of historical narratives. As we stand today, the path to peace remains steep and winding. The Israel-Palestine conflict is not just a story of politics and power, but of people and their dreams. We've journeyed from the genesis of this conflict to the Balfour Declaration and its repercussions, through to the creation of Israel. We've witnessed the devastating wars and intifadas and assessed the current state of affairs. This historical odyssey has shown us the human cost of this enduring conflict. We've seen lives disrupted, dreams shattered, and generations grow up in the shadow of uncertainty and conflict. Yet, amidst all this, we've also seen resilience and an ongoing quest for a peaceful resolution. From the high-level political maneuvers to the everyday experiences of Israelis and Palestinians, it's clear that this conflict is a deeply rooted and complex issue. Yet the human spirit remains indefatigable, ever hopeful for a better, more peaceful future. In the face of such a complex and deeply rooted conflict, one can only hope for a future where both Israelis and Palestinians can live in peace and security.